Would you agree that coaching is relational? You establish a relationship with your client to be able to better work together. What happens if artificial intelligence or another form of advanced technology will take over that human element, and we coaches will no longer be needed? Let's ask Sam Isaacson, an expert in technology and a coach as well. Ask him how best to use different forms of technology to be a better coach, and what type of technology is coming in the future. You are in technology and coaching, so tell us a little bit about how technology can help coaching.
Yeah, I mean, the name of my most recent book is Superhuman Coaching, and it's there for a reason. When you look at what technology does, it takes part of who we are as humans and it makes it better, or it takes it outside of our body. So a really simple example of this would be the wheel. If you sit in a car and it's got the wheels, what it's doing is it's powering you with effectively superhuman legs. The wheel allows us to go faster, it allows us to travel for longer, it allows us to carry more things than we're able to do normally. So technology has got this ability to take what we are as humans and make it even better, to turn us into these superhumans. And so I really feel like, from a coaching perspective, I'm not blanket saying that all technology is great. I'm not an evangelist for tech at all, really, to be honest, but I am an evangelist for coaching. And so anything that makes coaching better, I am a fan of. And I think there are certain ways that we can use technology that take what we do naturally, as part of our skill set as coaches, and turns that into something that is uniquely brilliant and really impacts on coachees and that whole experience in a way that we can't by ourselves.
So tell us a little bit about coaching, because coaching is relational, but how can artificial intelligence be of any help? Which is techie, right?
Oh, that really is tech. Yeah. If you're trying to train an artificial intelligence tool, you really need to know what you're doing in that space.
Okay, define it for our listeners. Artificial intelligence, how you define it.
There's probably two ways that it gets implemented from a technical perspective. One of those is the automation of a linear process. So there might be some kind of decision tree. So if this happens, then do this action. But what you're doing there is you're saying, when there is this stated input, it's always going to produce the same output. It's just going to follow this process. That's one kind of way that it works. And you can see that in Excel. If you type in the calculation, add this number with this number, then it just spits out the number. And of course, it does that extremely quickly. It does it exactly the same every time. It's way better than a human. The other bucket is really called machine learning, I suppose. And what that does is you give it a huge data set where you're saying, based on these inputs, these are what the outputs look like. And now you've got a piece of technology that's sitting in there, this artificial intelligence technology, that is able to guess what else might be a valid output based on a different input. So, for example, a really good example of this that you will have seen, and I think most listeners will have experienced, is when you click that button that says, "I'm not a robot," and it says, which of the pictures here have got traffic lights in them? It's got a huge data set of lots of different photographs of traffic lights from different angles, and you're going past them at speed, and they're different sizes and shapes. And as humans, we just intuitively look at a traffic light and we know what it looks like. From a computer perspective, it's extremely difficult to analyze precisely what it is that makes these two different things both traffic lights. And so it'll take all of these valid images of traffic lights that it's got, and when you click on one, you're kind of helping to train the tool to prove it to it that yes, that was a correct prediction of this thing being a traffic light. So when we're thinking about applying that into coaching, then it's extremely difficult and quite risky, really, to use that second one. Because even though coaching is really creative and it's intuitive, it's very difficult. It isn't a linear process. Actually, to put a coachee in a space where you're going to be using some kind of predictive technology to try to guess at what a good outcome might be, the technology isn't there yet. And coaching is so unique. When you go into a coaching conversation, you have got no idea at the beginning what's going to happen. Is the coachee going to cry at some point? It's a thing that might happen, but you can't tell at the beginning if that's going to happen or not. And so putting a piece of machinery into that to try to add to it that way, it can be quite difficult, with some exceptions, which I might mention a little bit later on. But that first bucket, the more predictable, linear, process-driven piece, there you can get some real value from that.
So like the A of automation, so that it can be predictive if it's linear, but as coaching is totally unlinear, where do you think it could be useful then to use artificial intelligence?
There are 3 use cases currently that are being used. I think there's probably more. I mean, there will be more in the future, but there's 3 right now that's starting to impact a bit on coaching. One of those is very straightforward, relatively straightforward, and there's been research done around this which demonstrates how effective it is. And so I feel quite confident talking about this one. And it's around supporting coachees in setting goals. So as a coach, we know the idea of a SMART target is a good thing. It helps a coachee to clarify what they're heading for. It gives them some time boundaries around it. It makes it nice and measurable. It makes sure it's aligned with their purpose and the organizational strategy that they're sitting within. It's a really good thing to do. But most coaches, I'm saying this anecdotally, I haven't got strong research on this, but most coaches don't really like going down that SMART target route because it's quite boring. You end up just having to ask these same repeated questions. When are you going to do this by? Okay, you give me an answer, but it isn't specific enough. So I'm going to repeat the question. I'm going to make sure that we get this really nailed down. That could be 20, 30 minutes of a coaching conversation where we could be doing something much more exciting. Whereas a robot, it's because it's such a linear process. It's just answer this set of questions until you're comfortable with the output. Actually, a robot could do that much more effectively than a human could. And like I said, the research has shown that actually coachees, when they have that experience, get effectively the same output as they would do from a human coach. And that then frees up the human coaching to be a lot more creative, doing the really challenging, intuitive side of coaching that I think, that most coaches love a lot more.
So absolutely, I can see how some of it can be, even by giving a questionnaire, some of it can be very useful for a general. But sometimes the way you say the goal you have will indicate the degree of motivation, or if there's something that bothers them, which I guess the computer cannot yet do that. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, there's a difference between what we call narrow artificial intelligence and broad artificial intelligence. And narrow would be that it's trained within very, very tight boundaries. So a really great example of this would be if you go onto thispersondoesnotexist.com, what you'll see is a website that gives you a photograph of a human being. Now, it actually isn't a photograph. It's just been generated in that instant by you typing it in. And if you go there a second time, it'll be a different image. It looks like a photograph, but it's not. And it's so good. I mean, it's extremely convincing. If you do it, you'll think you're looking at a photo, even though you're not. The reason it can do it so well is because it's so tight. It only knows how to do pictures of humans. It can't do anything else. If you asked it to give you a picture of a dog, it just wouldn't know how to compute it. And broad artificial intelligence is just learning kind of anything that it picks up based on a potentially infinite number of possibilities. That is nowhere near yet. And nobody yet has taken that idea of, I'd like to detect how convinced you are that this is a really great objective that you're going to head towards. And so what it would need is to train a tool to be able to do that using a massive data set. And yeah, nobody's done it yet. And I don't know anybody who's trying to at the moment. So that's where the value of the human comes in, that the tool can help you to go through the linear process piece. You followed a model and you know that that's good. And then the human coach can come in and make coaching, add the magic of the conversation and relationship that coaching really is.
Well, I appreciate your honesty. So we're not out of business yet, right?
No.
Well, you've had a virtual reality experience coaching. So tell us a little bit about that. There you are really physically almost, or virtually anyway. You can see the whole body and how they react. So can virtual reality do a little bit what artificial intelligence cannot do?
Yes, these two things are completely different technologies. And so I think that they tend to get bunched together because they're all kind of in the realm of cutting edge technology that we're starting to see creep in. But virtual reality is really, it's a way where you put a headset on and it completely then immerses you in that environment. So, at the moment I'm in my home office and, I can still see other parts of my life surrounding me. As soon as I put the headset on, the only thing that I can sense with my eyes is what I'm being presented with from the headset. And because it changes as I move around, as I look in a different direction, then the visuals change. It feels very much like I'm there. I mean, at an unconscious level, the brain is convinced that I'm in a different location, to the point that when you go from one location to another, it feels like you've traveled such a long distance that it must have been some time ago that you were there, and it can feel like you've been in there for a different length of time than you actually are. It's very strange. But what that does is it allows you to meet other people in that same virtual environment, and then you interact with each other in a much more natural, embodied way, because rather than staring into the tiny 2D laptop screen or a mobile phone or something like that, you're just looking at somebody in the same environment that you're at, and you're able to move around it together. Some of that you can physically do, some of that you might be able to move around using a little joystick, but you're moving around the environment together and it feels very much like you're in the same physical place. Now, that's got some levels of application in coaching. We meet through video and we meet in person, and it could be another alternative to that, just like phone is another alternative to that. It could just be another alternative. I don't think that it would become a primary form of meeting yet. But if you look at the technologies that are currently being developed over the next few years, like the Meta Quest. Meta have just released the Quest Pro, which is much higher definition on those goggles. Amazon have released a set of smart glasses that have got 360-degree sound plugged into a pair of glasses that, I'm not kidding, are the same size as mine. And if you look on Amazon now for Amazon smart glasses, you'll see that they're there, and you won't be able to believe that they've got a computer built into them. Apple have got a device coming out in 2024 that it says is not going to need tethering to a smartphone and will have email and phone calling and everything built in to the glasses. And so you won't even need a smartphone anymore. You just put the glasses on and then you'll be able to meet in that space.
Just want to interrupt you a second. Now, they did have those glasses in the past, because I remember traveling and there's a slight, you can see because it's a tiny chip that's on the glasses, but then it didn't go anywhere. Nobody used it. So what happened there, and what is the difference between that technology that was done several years ago and the future one?
Yes, so it is the same underlying technology, and that there are a few different things that have changed in terms of technological developments over the last 10 years or so that sort of thing came out. One is that target market of these devices now are, well, partly it's consumers, like direct to consumer, like an iPhone, and partly it's into organizations. So you're saying, actually, you would like to run the best team meetings that you can in your organization for your executive team, for example. Hey, here's a great way to do it. Give them all a pair of smart glasses, and then they can do it that way instead. That's not the same target market as was being used 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was to developers. And so actually, the only people that were buying it were developers. And as a result of that, the cost was extremely high. And the look of them, it looked like a prototype. So, it had a little block of glass on the outside of the spectacles. Well, those things have kind of stopped adoption of it. And so you're right, it came out, people used it for a bit. There was a little bit of a flurry of media activity, and then it went away. Whereas now, I think, Apple saying that they're going to release a device really says quite a lot. They tend to only move when they're confident, and when they do, they tend to influence consumer behavior. You can tell that through AirPods. Bluetooth earphones have existed for a very long time, and Apple suddenly released theirs, and everyone's got one now. So, I think they've got an ability to influence consumer behavior in that way. And so within the next couple of years, some of the technologies that have been developed since, like cameras that are on the inside and the outside of the glasses that allow you to express things in the virtual space in a very natural way that wasn't possible before, is now possible. So for example, in the most recent Meta Quest devices, as you change your expression on your real life face, that same expression is replicated on the face of your avatar that you're kind of inhabiting in the virtual space. So suddenly you can express yourself in a very natural way. That makes a conversation better.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, and it really is, and the problem is it's very difficult to describe it. And the pictures that you see, if you look on the internet for, pictures of people in virtual reality, it looks like a computer game. And so if you like computer games, you might feel a bit attracted to it, but it doesn't look like a very fun computer game. And if you're not into computer games, then it just looks like, well, this is not something that's for me. Whereas when you put the headset on and you experience being in this space, I was doing some research over this summer, actually, delivering some team coaching using virtual reality. And we had a great insight from somebody after session 4 or so who said, when I first started using these, I was really excited being gimmicky and I wanted to know what the toys were I'd get to play with are. And it's only now I'm realizing that the real power is in just having a nice conversation. And that's where my passion for it comes, really, is that it gives you the chance to have a really nice conversation.
Okay, you got to explain why it gives you a nice conversation compared to a reality conversation.
Sure. So it is not the same as an in-person conversation. There's something unique about meeting somebody in person. You get to feel the energy from them. You can move around a physical space together. And so I'm not trying to suggest that we should be doing it instead of in person. And of course, when you move away from video, then you're losing the actual image of the person as well. And so you are going to be losing something. But phone calls are really nice. So I really like doing phone coaching. And part of the reason I like doing phone coaching is that I can close my eyes and listen to the words that the coachee is using and listening to their tone of voice. And I can really pick up on what they're saying and ask them some good questions, really concentrating on them in a way I find myself, it's difficult to do when I'm on the video, where it feels like I'm quite conscious of the fact that I'm there and they're there and we're looking at each other.
And it's what you mentioned earlier, that virtual reality blocks all the distractions around the person, so you only focus on the person. So in some ways, that's also the benefit of virtual reality. It blocks out distraction.
Yes, absolutely. So that's it. There's no interruption in it. The spaces that we're going to meet in a virtual sense, they're carefully designed to be really nice spaces. So we could meet in the nice forest somewhere, or we could meet on the top of a mountain, or we could meet in orbit. And then halfway through a coaching session, we think, okay, now we've had this nice conversation in orbit, looking down at the world passing by, and we've thought about these systemic issues and what role I could play. Now, shall we go and meet in my boardroom? And we can have the conversation there and think very practically about how I'm going to apply it. And on top of that, there's something that changes in the physiology. So when people are talking into a laptop, generally speaking, I know people have got different setups, but generally speaking, people are hunched over, they're staring down into the screen. And that's a very unnatural position to be in when you're having a nice conversation with somebody. Whereas in virtual reality, you've got the glasses on, you're relaxed, you're sitting back, and you're looking up into the person's eyes as you would do if you were meeting in person. And so there's something, I think, that happens physiologically, then has a really positive influence on the conversation.
So my last question would be, a lot of people text while they're in their car and then they're distracted. Would there be a law that you can't put these virtual glasses on while you drive or something like that? Because you could be driving at the same time looking at your email.
Yeah, so all of these things, it's important to think them through, and they're not yet at a stage at which they exist properly. So there don't have to be laws around it yet, but there almost certainly will be. And I would have thought that what they'll do is they'll replicate the way that my car system works. So at the moment, it's possible for me to navigate using my GPS, using the car computer, and it can be playing music. But if I get a text message, it will tell me I've received one, but I won't be allowed to view it unless I do something manually with the system, which you can't do if you're driving. And smart glasses will certainly have built into them navigation, I would have thought, so that it will overlay directions onto the roads that you're driving on and tell you, what to do, which lane to get in, and that sort of thing. You'll be able to listen to music through it. It'll have headphones, there won't be headphones probably in most cases. It'll be little speakers that feel like headphones, and they're private. They're not actually in your ears. And you'll be able to take calls and send emails and that sort of thing through it. But I wouldn't have thought you'll be able to use email at the same time as navigation. And that will be a control built in for exactly the reason that you've described there. It's for safety.
So my last question, just one more, because we're coming to the end of the podcast. Sure. Tell us a little bit about your book. And if someone wants to start to use technology, what would be your advice?
Yes, well, I think the answer to both of those parts is in the book, really, that I've had these conversations around coaching and technology for the last few years. And the most common question is, as you've just pitched it there, well, I'm a coach. I'm interested in using some technology. What can I do today? And so what the book does is it outlines a couple of principles around how we ought to be thinking about using technology in our coaching practice, because sometimes it's going to be really good all the time, and sometimes it's going to be bad as a general rule, and other times it's going to be a bit of a judgment call. And then it goes through 10 different technologies that I think are good practical ways that most coaches could start picking up a piece and start using it today. So one example of that would be using AI-generated artwork as a way to throw some creativity into a coaching conversation. It's just a website that you go onto and you type in a little prompt. If you can type, then you can use it. And the prompt could be something like, I'm looking to improve my executive presence. And what it will do is it'll generate a unique piece of artwork that only exists for that coaching conversation. As soon as you close the window, it disappears. So you can copy it and email it to each other if you like, or once it's gone away, it's gone. And that's the sort of thing that you can then ask a coachee, well, look at this image and tell me, what do you notice about it that you think is relevant to your situation? And the creativity that comes out of that, and the way that the brain is unlocked, is really powerful. And so in the book, then I go into 10 different sorts of technology that are very practical, you could pick up and use today, and could transform your coaching business, certainly make it a little bit different.
Well, thank you so very much. And of course, I'm an art collector, so it appeals to me a lot. And some people are very, very good at interpreting a design and projecting onto it. Others are less or have to grow into it. But Sam, this was most interesting. Thank you very, very much for sharing your knowledge and your insights.
Oh, Katrina, it's such a privilege to be here and get the time. So thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Excellent Executive Coaching Podcast. You can subscribe to all future podcasts at excellentexecutivecoaching.com. Join us each Wednesday to learn more about the latest trends in leadership techniques and bring your coaching to the next level. To learn more about Dr. Burris's CEO Mastermind, use the contact form at excellentexecutivecoaching.com.